Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Made the motion.
Okay, so we have approved for Joe and Howard to participate virtually. That gives us 7. Okay. Again, welcome everybody. Hopefully you had a chance to look through the minutes. Ken and Jonica, I did send you one quick just typo issue to be fixed, but that's it. Any discussion on the minutes? Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Okay, a second. Kathy, second. All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. I also want to let everybody know that since we met last, we saw one of the last things we did, we approved the annual report. That has been finalized and submitted up to the department leadership. Okay. So I want to shift over. There's really a big chunk of the discussion today is going to be what we're going to call 2025 way ahead, right? And there's probably a million things we can talk about here, but I want to just brief you on some updates. First, when we look at our current recommendations from the annual report, this is what I really see as the following focal points for 2025, and we'll get into all of my reasonings why. But, several are in good place, but really a focus on keeping the supply chain going for offshore wind, workforce as well, and potentially R&D to lower costs, which if you saw the news the last few days, we kind of need to lower some costs, right? Like to a tune of about $1 billion. So that's kind of where I'm thinking, those 3 things. So last meeting, we shared that we were going to try to get a meeting with Director Glenn Davis. So Chris and I did go meet with the director up in Richmond and really just talked about all things VOWDA, what was going on with offshore wind, trying to get where his head was at. And really, we talked about the best way VOWDA can continue to support the current administration and kind of some alignment on some goals. Okay. So the first thing we talked about was really continuing to focus on capturing the most economic development opportunities for Virginia around offshore wind. I mean, that's something that we've seen over the years, and I think that's still a right spot for this group. And I know others like the Alliance and the Chamber and the VMA, we work to focus on the economic development piece, right? Bringing more manufacturing, more service jobs, et cetera. We also had a separate meeting with VEDP, with Jason Elkubi, to talk about renewing and revising the offshore wind grant program that we had last year. If you guys recall, VEDP put out a grant that would allow maritime and manufacturing companies to move into an adjacent space with offshore wind by adding different, business lines, manufacturing lines, something like that. Like a company that was making widgets for ships now could likely pivot and create a new widget for, offshore wind. So that grant, the scope was pretty narrow. There were 3 companies that applied. All 3 were awarded grant money. But we had so much money left over and the General Assembly just pulled it back in. So we talked about, we think there's room to grow this type of grant again or make it more successful, but the language and the criteria just needed to be a little broader and not so narrow. So he liked that idea. He was going to go back and talk with the VEDP team and get back with us on that. This is going to be an after session thing for sure. So that is, like I said, focusing on economic development opportunities. It was the grant, correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, it was like $2 million was originally put in the pot. And the spend, don't quote me, but it was roughly, I think each group was able to get up to 150,000 or 200,000, something like that. 250. I think we barely spent 300,000 out of 2 million. And then so the rest of the fund just reverted back to the common fund, to the general fund. So
any insight to give it?
Oh, no. Yeah. So it was shared far and wide abroad. everywhere to applicable folks. It was just the criteria was pretty narrow as far, it was very specific about, you had to have this kind of size company and they needed to kind of be spent this kind of way. So we had, I mean, I know a lot of the chambers and a lot of the associations shared it with all our membership. There was interest, but when people started looking into it, it was, I don't fit this criteria. I don't fit this criteria.
We can't hear the other board members speaking.
But I was saying is that, so it sounds like the criteria for the grants, that's not without actually knowing the business types and the setups. Like, are they too small? Are they those things without?
Well, that was again, VDP owns this program. So our recommendation to them is we still think it's viable, but we think that the criteria needs to be opened up. So we can collaborate with them on that, but they're supposed to get back to me.
But as of now,
It's all reverted.
all right.
So the second thing we talked about with Director Davis is teeing up 2026 code revisions as needed. We talked about this at the last meeting, where if we think that there's issues in the code, in the bylaws, in whatever, the spring and summer after session is really where we'll need to start doing that work to kind of tee everything up. Because it's going to be too late if we don't do it that way. Okay, and then he was supportive of that. I mean, he was like, sure, give us some recommendations, what we think. Third thing we discussed, and this is important, is positioning VOWDA to be in the best place for the incoming governor in 2026. That is pretty important too, regardless of who that is going to be. And we'll talk about it a little later, but kind of given the current state of how Virginia might feel about offshore wind and how the new presidential administration feels about offshore wind, our job is going to be to kind of just position ourselves to be the best available of service, if you will, to the new governor. And we'll figure out what that looks like. He continues to like providing an annual white paper on recommendations. He also offered to come to our next spring VOWDA meeting to provide feedback on the white paper, to give insight on what the Department of Energy is thinking. And we also talked about, the final thing we talked about was working together with other authorities for a clean energy economy as appropriate, because the Department of Energy now, I mean, has several authorities dealing with clean energy. There's solar, there's offshore wind, there's nuclear, there's Southwest Virginia. What else am I missing, right? Yep. And so we kind of, exactly. So lots of boards. And when we all started talking about workforce, for example, the workforce is a good example, is like, that's something all of these authorities are working on. And so when we said, okay, instead of just, you have a group that's working on like offshore wind workforce and someone's doing solar workforce and someone's doing nuclear workforce, what if it was just clean energy workforce? That was a well-received idea. I don't know what that looks like. So that was the discussion with Glenn. Other potential ideas we talked about, at least Chris and I, for 2025 was possibly getting the patrons of the Clean Economy Act to come in and brief the group on, the finer details of it, or a DOE staffer or something like that, as well as having presentations to VOWDA from the other groups as far as what other tasks are regarding to offshore wind. And that would advise the code update. For example, what's the VMA doing? What's the Alliance doing? What's the Chamber doing? What's VEP doing? What is the Workforce Council doing? Because that's going to give us an update on possibly any type of code revision, because no one else was really doing these things when the original code was kind of put together, right? So beyond that, it was the idea of again, we could spend the rest of the year working on a work plan. That is my comments on a way ahead. I don't know if anybody had any questions or thoughts?
Maybe we can find out.
Can't hear.
Hear me now, Howard?
Now I can hear you.
Okay, so I was commenting if we could tie in the current bill matrix, because it looks like workforce development is where the most traction is right now. So of all the bills that are going through, that one has passed the House, and it is to set up a task force and a fund development using a grant that the Department of Energy received.
Yeah.
Was something I read in the cost analysis for this bill. The fund has not been given an amount in the bill that I could find. Analysis of it, when you pull that up, it is referring to monies received through a grant of the. Yes.
Those are all on hold now.
But it appeared that it was already received.
Let's do this real quick because we're going to get into bills. Is there any other comments or questions on the it's way ahead discussion with VDP, discussion with Director Davis? I think he was open to the idea that if we thought it was important to go ahead and take a look at it and do a markup and submit it for review.
What would be key to hear?
Missing all this.
Oh. So the comment was knowing from Dominion, for example, what is the cause of the increase of their project? Is it mainly based in getting through regulations or workforce or cost of materials? And what is the source of the increase in their costs? So maybe part of our research and recommendations in the white paper could cover that for the current and future projects.
So you're going to need to sit probably near a microphone because you're between two, and that's not going to work.
Dominion has indicated that the recent increase in rates is because of transmission, getting it onto the PJM network.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
Maybe we focus our sights on that. Anything that can be changed in our code of regulations that can affect that.
Well, I think though, if the SEC is well covering that and is really the one who's responsible for hammering them on all that, that is not something I think we need to wade into, and it's not in our current kind of outline, I think. We would be a me too in that case, because of course everyone's going to say, yeah, rising costs are no good, right?
Sorry, when we are talking about 2026 code revisions, we're talking about what VOWDA's mission and objectives and all that kind of stuff, editing that and changing that. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, because it's one of those, since it's a decade plus old now, and like I said, so much has changed and evolved that I would almost say, there's a good chunk of what is in there now that is either irrelevant or other groups are handling. So it just kind of needs a refresh, but or that. And so it's just, it needs that fresh look. And, but to your question about, you know, the current administration is, I mean, yes, VOWDA has been around for a decade. It's been under multiple administrations. And so I think part of that is going to be, how can we support the existing administration in the current year, but also teeing up ourselves to be, you know, the most helpful to the new administration, whatever that looks like, right? Because it could be, it could look status quo, it could be a whole new direction, right? And so I think we just need to kind of be ready for that, whatever that is.
Thanks for clarifying, Eileen. I was moving ahead to the white paper recommendations, not the code for VOWDA itself.
No, it's not the appropriate time now, but when we're having discussions of just considering the charter to, would we possibly be open to including onshore wind as well?
I don't know. I mean, yes.
Yes, there
It's going away.
Zero for onshore wind, and Rocky Forge is coming on at the end of 2026, and there's another project out that's coming on later. So onshore wind is going to be a reality pretty soon. Fire and everything, Amazon. Fine. But yeah, future discussions to maybe awesome. I think there's going to be a lot of supply chain that we'll want to attract. That's going to be very synergistic with offshore wind.
Yep. Okay. So that's what we're thinking. And I'll get into that a little bit more on the next steps at the end. That kind of lays out some work for us, and kind of is transitioning now into the phase about General Assembly and relevant legislative items. I want to marry these two discussions together because part of it is also the current climate. And I definitely don't want to get into what we think about the current climate. It's kind of irrelevant. It's more of what does the current climate look for us for the rest of the year? You know, we know kind of where offshore wind sits as far as an all the above approach at the current governor's administration. We know what the new presidential administration feels about offshore wind right now. So part of VOWDA may be needing to go into a holding pattern, for lack of a better term, or really look at some internal things this year, such as code revision, other things we can focus on. Because what I don't want is this group to spend a lot of energy and invested time and emotion into anything that's just not going to go anywhere this year. I mean, that's just the reality. So keep that in mind. Looking at, when we look at the General Assembly bills, so the list that Jonica sent out before, she sent to all of you earlier this year, there's a handful of bills on there related to offshore wind. Really, most of them have all died. Today is crossover. So all the things in the House have now been shifted over to the Senate and vice versa. But a good chunk of them are dead or failed or were left in committee. One that is cruising along is this HB 1616 by Michael Feggins here in Virginia Beach for an offshore wind workforce fund. And what this bill does is it asks the Division of Offshore Wind in the department to establish an offshore wind industry workforce program and fund before January 1st, 2026 to advance the offshore wind industry and support workforce training for the industry in the Commonwealth. So passed the House, now it's being pushed over to the Senate.
Was an
Not hearing anything.
Energy received a $16 million grant from the U.S. Department of Energy in 2024 to support workforce training programs related to ongoing offshore wind development in the Hampton Roads region. That was conference.
Workforce Council. No, I don't think this is part of the Workforce Council. I don't think so.
No, this is to manage the program and the fund within the Department of Energy. It would be a new hire in the Department of Energy. Mhm. Was that accurate, Ken? Donica?
It's not ringing a bell. I know we got money to do workforce. Stuff like.
So this is the state physical impact statement that's referring to that. Michael Figgins.
Okay. So that's the only one really worth mentioning. I know there's the idea of us writing some sort of letter of support. Kathy, you had mentioned that. Was there any discussion on that?
My recommendation would be to write a letter of support for that bill. It's a House bill. It just crossed over to Senate.
Is there any comment on that? Or is that something we need to research more?
Doesn't even know about.
There are lots of things I don't know about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I guess that's the, I mean, is that's the will of the group.
Well, the other question is, does it need support in the idea of if it's cruising along? I mean, do we need to go through the time and effort of writing a letter?
Amendment, are you? It's been rewritten, so there's an amendment to it that was, so the latest, I think, is January 28th. Latest version.
Development in the state of Virginia. All the players are doing. Our job to go and spend the taxpayers' dollars. At the governor's commission. Hiring apprenticeship coordinator. But so do we,
I'll ask Eileen. I mean, Eileen, you're probably the one who keeps your finger on the pulse more for workforce.
It's, I think, one of the things that surfaced in the analysis that we did last year was how there's disparate entities that are involved with workforce development. everybody doing really good work, but there's no coordination and like analysis of where the gaps are. That needs to happen. There has to be. Workforce development is housed in a variety of
Yeah.
different places. It's housed in energy, but not specifically for housed in workforce, not specifically for options. That's housed more in the maritime and yeah, you just have a lot of folks doing a lot of, especially with the training programs, you have TCC, you have everybody doing all these different, but there's no like one source where anybody says, you know, where, who's coordinating all the offerings that are out there for training programs or jobs and things. So the Hampton Roads Workforce Council, they they have coordination on maritime jobs.
And only a portion of the maritime jobs, really.
Determine if it's actually.
Find out that exactly what Hampton Roads and point to that as being a model or a starting point on which at our coordination, and then once you have it coordinated, promotion, you know, so that everybody learns about it. So
Any other questions or comments on this?
It's pretty ambitious to have a global wind organization training program.
But I think we have a few here already. We have a few.
Okay,
That's not what he's saying. That's not what the bill like.
No.
It is. Consider establishing a global wind organization training program to meet minimum safety requirements.
Yeah, GWO, yeah. So that's that's just a certification. And
okay. I'm not familiar with it. It just almost looks like Department of Energy is supposed to establish, a global program.
Vegans work colleges too. So it's just.
Can't hear.
Companies are gonna retrain them, even if they have the GWO certification, companies themselves are gonna retrain them, Stevens made that. So, yeah.
It's more an informational question or comment than it is that something needs to change in the bill.
one of the other recommendations that we had is pre-employment programs and pre-apprenticeship programs as well. And I'm not sure where Fegan's bill.
well, again, my concern is because one, I mean, this is how this is going to go in reality, is session's going to be over before our next meeting,
Yep.
which means if you guys want a letter done, I have to write it, and it has to come from me, not the council, or not the authority. And I need language, and I'm just not sure this is if the juice is worth the squeeze. If it is going along, if it's fine, if it's coasting, I don't want to do necessarily a Me Too kind of support if it's. Well, yeah. I'd have to like go back to my desk and write it. Yeah, and I have Maritime Day next week, so work on that.
I see a benefit in submitting a letter, whether it has a great success of chance of success of passing. because it is one of our lines of effort. And something is being done about it. And if we can, here's our chance because of crossover. Here's what passed in the House. If we want anything tweaked in that or suggest anything get tweaked in it, now is the time to do that when Senate is reviewing it.
But I think we don't have the, at least me personally, and I don't know who around the room has the expertise to actually do any tweaking on this. That's like credible. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So let's do this. I'd like to make a motion for a vote that we'll have a vote that if you all want to authorize myself to write a letter, but let's put it up to a vote. So all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
No,
Oh,
All right, motion fails. Yeah, and it's on our watch list too.
Not from this.
Yeah,
organization,
100%.
from the change.
Okay. Okay, but I think this also opens up the discussion for 2026. Because this is, Director Davis said the same thing. And I get it, because we had the conversation, I think, the year prior with Chelsea Jenkins when she was in. They want our feedback like over the summer of like what needs to be done as far as the policy shaping. I know for the last 2 years, they were not as receptive to VOWDA per se getting involved in session because it was just moving too quick and it was just too quick, right? So this does put the target back on as far as summertime work, that if there's things we want to do or that we think need tweaking or need changing, then we kind of focus on getting out ahead of it. Any other discussion or questions on the state side?
I would say the HB 1999 and SP 1373, we may look at, it did fail, but
Yeah.
we may look at that to tweak our recommendation for 2026, because that's kind of like the fund that went away, but it is more for an energy innovation pilot.
Mhm.
And maybe see what the issues were in the committees with that and offer some tweaks to that. Try to breathe life back into some type of innovation fund.
So look at revisiting those for 2026.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we can relook at that. And the only comment I'll make on the federal side, and I really don't want to slide down this slide, is I don't know, I know as much as you all reading the headlines. From what we understand, the CVOW commercial project is not impacted. It is going, and I've had to explain that to some people. That project is under construction. The ban was on any type of like new permitting, new leasing, anything like that. The other projects, CVOW East and South, their timeline is far enough out, and Dominion had made the statement basically that they basically said they're not sweating it because they'll deal with those after the current administration, right? So from my standpoint, I don't see much changing for Virginia companies. LS Greenlink Cable also said that they're not tied to any one particular project, that they provide cable to the international market, that Europe has a big backlog right now. So this should not impact what PMT is doing. It should not impact what LS Greenlink Cable is doing.
Manufacturing tax credits that were in the IRA,
Okay. Yep.
counting on some of those IRA tax cuts too, I mean, tax credits as well.
In fact, just yesterday, we formed a very broad in its focus right now.
can't hear.
So what I'm going to do, Howard, if you could just check your speakers, because we're all but swallowing the microphones. But if I could ask, yeah, if Brian, if you and Ken could actually move in front of a mic, that would make my life a lot easier. If you could physically move, that'd be great. Thanks.
No, I was just saying, we formed a committee this week to do an analysis into the new administration's policies across the board, the impact of tariffs, the new policies on return to work, DE&I, all of the policies and how it affects the business community in Hampton Roads. An initial indication is there is going to be an impact. Especially with our government and federal facilities. But we're also looking at supply chains. We're looking at possible impact on the port and other things. And so that is a rapidly moving target. We're going to meet again next week. We've got some due outs coming in next week. So I should be able to provide some information relative to this.
Thank you. That's good. Now, the other, and I'm not going to speak out of hand. If Chris was here, he'd give it a better idea, but it's possible that Dominion's lease on PMT would be impacted from a scheduling standpoint, because by the time CVOW is 50% complete of construction, right? Which means once the other half of those components are up and out, if there's not a new flow of projects, that terminal is going to sit idle, which could put, again, I'm speaking out of turn here, but it could put Dominion and Port Authority back into a discussion on what that lease looks like, and not just letting it sit there, right? So that's possible, because that needs a project pipeline. Yep, 100%. So I also believe in taking all this day by day. So no, Joe's not talking. Okay.
Wave your hand if you're trying to talk to communicate with us.
No, he's not. Okay. That really covers everything I want to talk about on the legislative side, both state and federal. I want to pivot over to what I'll call just other business and closing remarks, or anything anybody else wants to say. So as per our bylaws, president and vice president, Chris and I, can serve 2-year terms, right? This should have taken place at our Q4 meeting or annual meeting, but we kind of realized it a month or two ago. In short, we need to have elections at the next meeting, or a possible subcommittee to kind of look at the next chair, vice chair of VOWDA, right? So really the statement here is, if you are interested in one of these roles, any of our board members, Chris is not here, just reach out to me, shoot me a note, and then we're going to figure out if we want to do like a subcommittee to talk through that, or we just put it to a vote at the next meeting. So any questions on comment? Nobody needs to raise their hand today, but
Bylaws have,
no. No term limits, but it just says, like it's a 2-year term. So whether it's the same gang, if it's new gang, we just have to have a new vote.
And you're gonna do that in the next meeting?
So Joe, go ahead.
Are you gonna do the vote next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we put it to a vote for next meeting. I think we're both just chewing on it. We'll see. Okay, so this ties back to, again, looking at all the comments we've made today. Again, what I think, based on these conversations with the administration, with some direction we've been given, and reviewing kind of where we are with some things, I still think for 2025, our focus should kind of be looking at supply chain, workforce, and potentially really spooling up R&D. But the reality is, this authority can't do anything by itself. So that's really the preface I want to make, is because we have no money, we have no ability to really do anything. I mean, even like R&D, for example, is between Dominion Energy and the state of Virginia, because the state owns the lease, Dominion owns the towers. So we could have lots of good ideas and anything like that, but like state and Dominion have to ultimately buy into any of that. So that's where I kind of think our focus being, especially given the current state of the industry, state and federal level, the thought is, again, continue just to put VOWDA in the best position it can be to serve the incoming administration in 2026, whatever that looks like. So that was my only comments. But now the floor is open to other comments or other business that any of you all would like to discuss.
Regarding R&D, you know that Virginia Energy is the leaseholder for the research lease area, and we had a Swedish company approach us this year with a proposal to test kind of a new and innovative combined wave action, wind, solar type platform. And they were looking at the research lease area, and it is possible, but they would have to jump through the same hoops that Dominion had to jump through to do the CVOW project. And it just basically it killed it. So anything in the research lease area itself is very problematic from a federal
So
standpoint.
why is that?
Why is what?
Well, I guess the question is, if Dominion had a lot of hurdles using it, and if this new company was interested and it was too problematic, but Virginia owns the lease, what's the problem? Or like, is the criteria too strict? Is it?
They would have had to have done the same environmental type reviews, the historic preservation reviews,
Also goes.
Coast Guard reviews. And originally their idea, and this from my standpoint was a deal killer, they wanted to interconnect their device with the CVOW project. And I knew that was going to be a non-starter from Dominion standpoint. Then we looked at running cable to shore, and then that became problematic because very expensive. Then we looked at doing it in state waters. And anyway, in the end, it wound up dying. Slow and very tedious death.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Can you say that again? You say in the mic.
Can't hear you.
Okay.
Is it switched on?
Yeah. It's on.
I've got my volume up at total.
All right.
tops. Yeah.
Now using.
Okay.
Tried exploring that, but
Yeah.
we never ended up finding that a solution.
Okay.
Are you getting anything from Open Seas, Ken?
Because I wonder, and I'm no expert in this at all, so I would leave it to those that are. I mean, I don't know if that's something worth reviewing. Is we have this lease area that practically no one can use, this research lease area. And just my curiosity is why? Is it a regulatory issue? Is it a permitting issue? And how much of that is self-inflicted? Is there too many requirements on them from the state level to look at that? Because what's the point of having a research lease area if no one can use it?
Right. Well, the research lease area specific would have been all federal. It wouldn't have
Oh.
involved any state issues. So it was really BOEM and what their requirements were going to be, because
Okay.
they wanted to anchor this thing to the seabed. And so you got to jump through a bunch of hoops if you want to do that. And then running a cable, you got to jump through hoops to do that. And
That's kind of obligations to the state.
Done.
Costing the taxpayers dollars.
no,
Buy the lease or just?
no, we hold the lease. It's a research lease, so we hold it for the duration of the lease agreement. And I can't remember what that is. I can find it, but
Pay rent on it?
What?
Do we pay rent on it?
Nope.
No.
no.
Paid a lot to get it though. But
We didn't pay anything for the research lease because it is a research lease.
yeah,
It's not a
but
commercial. They're not making any money off of it.
So sure, the cost of R&D.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the cost of getting it
That Dominion, or was that the state of Virginia?
We spent quite a bit
There's
on
been a bunch of
research related stuff. Yeah, leading up to the CVOW, several
Wanna
million
re-
dollars.
Yeah, if you want to look at an ROI on the investment for a research area.
But don't go to the State Corporation Commission with that because they would
Yeah, no,
wholeheartedly.
back that statement. But there is R&D going on though on the East Coast for the floating type of innovative, anything like that. I'm wondering how cost effective it was for them to get that, what they had to go through to get that up
Yeah,
north.
I'm not sure of, I know the West Coast, they've got a permitted area, and I can't remember the name of it. It's a DOE. Number of different companies are testing their technologies in that area, but for some reason, the Swedes just had an affection for Virginia and thought that they can set up a shop here eventually and just with the offshore wind turbines, and never told him this, but no, they would not if you saw and was, but
So BOEM, so to clarify and summarize, yeah, it's Virginia holds the lease, but BOEM, since it's a federal lease, they control all the permitting.
yes.
So this is it's a federal permitting
It
issue.
might have been more problematic just because of this particular technology and anchoring it to the seabed
Yeah.
and all that, and running a cable. And
Interesting.
there might be other research of things are going on Dominion's turbines right now that, like bird and bat studies and things like that, that are all helping, search, but those are types of things that don't have to go through BOEM.
Yeah, because I think, if it's not connecting to this, if it's not embedding anything to the seafloor or the turbines themselves, I mean, it makes me think of like other opportunities to utilize it, where if it's just like autonomous vessels going back and forth in there, and it's just they're using the water column. They're not necessarily messing with the turbines or the seafloor.
Drones for blade.
Exactly,
protection.
exactly. Stuff, you're not touching anything.
That was the open seas. That's why I asked if he's gotten anything through open seas. Might have gone through Dominion without you knowing also, right? Maybe.
Ask, can we get a report from just what R&D is happening in offshore wind and state? How can we say it's not happening if we don't even know what's happening?
Ken, who owns that?
Right, to
But
What she was asking is a list of the different R&D that is actually happening right now
You know,
in that lease area.
it would be just Dominion unless they came to us and let us know they wanted to do something there. They're doing it on the turbines. That's all in Dominions.
Okay. So we could ask Dominion on one.
Yes.
Okay. I is it have a representative from that appropriate for us to make?
Well, the problem is the only opening we have right now is the Space Flight Authority seat. And what we talked about, and the Space Flight Authority they're busy. That's my statement since it's a public meeting. So we had the discussion on, and I think this is in our code review, of removing the specific seat to the Space Flight Authority, if since they're very busy, which would open another actual, but it's all appointed. So again, it would be one of those things that, I mean, I like the idea of saying, from a nonpartisan standpoint, like it makes a lot of sense to have project developers at the table and just leave it like that. Right. Because we need actual project developers and offshore wind SMEs on this committee.
Dominion was on the authority.
They
for
were.
years.
I know.
They were. Yep. And then everybody kind of rolled off. But again, it's a government appointed seat, so we can
So talking.
100%.
Process for us to do those code revisions. Having another VOWDA meeting this summer or in this spring and discussing it, or can we,
It would be
homework assignments or
pretty much. I mean,
subcommittee groups or?
yeah, because we would have to, in my discussions with Glenn, it was us to mark up whatever we feel like marking up, maybe have a committee meeting, but it's ultimately going to go up through DOE. So, or the Virginia Department of Energy. So the staff then can take that to their internal policy team or whatever, and then whatever happens, happens. All we're going to be able to do is make recommendations. It's not our code. But DOE is going to have to carry it. And when they're going to have to find patrons and do all that. So they're going to have to carry the water. It's our job, I think, to go through it and make recommendation on line items and stuff like that.
Timeline would be one where we would make those recommendations, maybe.
Yeah, if I were you all, and for those who like really care, this is our first meeting of the year. We have to have a quarterly meeting. I would definitely say bust out the code now and start looking at it before even our next meeting, because if we're ready to look at edits and revisions, we need to have that captured in a board meeting. And then, because we could probably get away with 2 more meetings depending on where they are. Well, it's February right now. Our Q1. I don't want to push it because we won't. Yeah, we would want to do it on our next meeting to be safe, because we need to get it in time
Fine,
before all the pre-filing starts happening.
right.
So that can definitely be, actually, that leads me right into my next thing I was going to talk about was, as far as next steps, it's really starting to think about the spring agenda. Do you want any particular people to come in? Like I said, Director Davis said he would come in. We could prepare action items for the summer, such as suggested code, bylaw, charter revisions, legislative items for 2026. It really goes into our spring agenda.
Planning for a longer spring meeting would be ideal. 'Cause that's when the bulk of the work is going to go. And as far as next steps go, that was one of, do you, the code, do you want a subcommittee for, what are we looking for the what? Our objectives covered? As far as recommendations for all of our objectives? The goal would be to get the white paper and the code, whether we include white paper or as a separate item by the end of June.
I think we prioritize the legislative side of the code rewrite, because I'm not sure how far our white paper is going to go. So what I don't want to do is like spend all this time and energy again where we like do a nice white paper and all the things that we have happen. I think, my personal view, I'm thinking our next white paper is almost best teed up for 26 with the new governor. That makes sense. Unless there's anything that's like really important that we think, because we don't need to put in the white paper, for example, keep working on supply chain, keep working on stuff like that. Because it's like, it's already happening. You know what I mean? There's nothing really that the DOE, because this was news to me, and Ken helped me understand this, and talking to Director Davis, our white paper goes to the DOE leadership. They talk about it with their policy team, and whatever happens, happens. So us ultimately recommending what we think Department of Energy should be doing. And then they decide between the current administration and themselves kind of what they do with our recommendations. Well, yeah, or in the round file. So, which I understand. So I would say, and I don't know, I want to open up for discussion. I mean, what do you guys think?
Priority needs to be the code.
Regarding the Space Flight Authority seat, I don't think you're gonna get any pushback from them themselves. Last time I spoke with Jim MacArthur, they're just slammed up and they don't have anyone to appoint, even if they were appointed.
And that was, and they even agree, they're like, why are we even here? But that was, again, that was part of a decade ago. We felt it was important for them, to be here. But it was important for them then because we were trying to figure out offshore wind. And yeah, but now it's like, we have all that pretty much taken care of. So spaceflight is kind of wondering, why are we even here? So if, I don't know how quick that change can be. I mean, that's a discussion with the policy team or well, it's in code. I mean, it's in code.
I know, it's too late to make a code change this
It's,
year.
Yeah.
it's really just an amendment, a code amendment, and code amendments are really not that big of a deal. Area it's make your business case and it's pretty much a done deal. Nobody's going to care about this.
So, well, procedurally, I don't know if anything can be done post crossover. Because it won't have a chance to have been to go to the other house. Okay. Well, let me ask this. Can I get, well, I'm going to ask the staff if we can just clarify if that's something we can do, if you guys can look into that and just see, and a simple yes or no, talk to the policy team. Is that something we could squeak in the next week or two? Okay. Okay. Yeah, just ask Larry. I mean, I appreciate that because then we can know, okay, I don't think it will be allowed, but if it can, to your point, that would save us a year of solving this problem.
But I'm not sure that they have to be in session for a code amendment.
Well, that's true. I mean,
I'm not sure. But but getting it while they're in session might be a heavy lift to get everything. Not meaning that we have to get everything we want in that. If we want just that name removed or that title removed from a position type of entity, that might be doable, but that can probably wait.
Well, the fact that they've known that the position is vacant, because I let them know a year ago that it was vacant and we needed to pick a person. You needed to pick a person from the Space Flight Authority and they've not done anything yet.
Yep.
That's.
yes.
And here,
Anyone basically can, or the board will assign.
But it's not designated specifically at the space.
It's an open position.
It's an open.
That the
It
governor would
still be the
appoint.
governor
The governor's
appointing
still-
them.
Yeah.
But right now it's just locked with it's a designated Space Flight Authority seat and they're not filling it. So if we can get that removed, then the governor can appoint whomever he wish. Okay, I like that. I like that. Okay. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
In your summary of your meeting with the director, you said he mentioned to keep up the white paper. So I would keep that on our radar to do, not as the top priority. Code, the change of objectives and et cetera, obviously a top priority. But then I think we should also keep the white paper on our radar and decide maybe 2-3 main points to focus on for this year to put in that white paper.
Well, yeah, and maybe, so to your point, maybe we tuck the code revisions in the white paper, but then if there's anything else that we think should actually be there, that's the part I'm struggling to I don't want to write recommendations that mean nothing because nothing's going to happen, right? Or anything that needs to. Well, to your point, demand, which we have no control over. An interesting thing was, for example, the grant, like the VEDP grant, where we think we could get better utilization out of it. But again, Department of Energy doesn't own that. That's a VEDP thing.
But it originates from the Department of Energy. They
No.
just gave it to VDP to manage.
No, it was a VEDP grant from the
Okay.
beginning. They managed
Again,
it.
if I go back to the the HB 1999 and SB 1373 to take a look at that, recommend revisions to that, and turn that into and from VEDP to bill,
No,
SB 1373. It would be establishes the Energy Innovation Pilot Program to foster the development of innovative energy projects by allowing program participants to provide grid services or other beneficial energy measures under the program. Blah, blah, blah. They would obtain state corporation commission approval. It looks like it's under Department of Energy. Come on, you don't have enough on your plate, Ken. Come on, you need more.
come on, Ken. It's
HB 1999 and SB 1370.
as the companion. Yeah.
I'm just looking at it right now.
It failed.
It did fail. It was like the
That's part of the process, I believe. Have to, whoever would be applying for the program, a program participant would have to authorization from SEC, but the program would be administered by Department. And possibly that's where the fund could move into pilot program. It's all about
unclear on what the SCC has to do with this, because the current VEDP program is just a manufacturing expansion type program.
Right, so it failed, and that might be one of the reasons. So this is our opportunity to look at this, find out why it failed, and offer suggested tweaks to it, and attach the fund to it for 2026.
But the energy innovation involves generation, so it could be offshore wind, hydrogen. That's not manufacturing at all. That's just generation. That's why that's why they're putting that SCC caveat on it, because that generation has had to cleared the SCC. That's my understanding, very naively, just hearing about this for the first time.
Well, I think so. That's why it's important so that we don't have to become policy wonks here, is if we get all these questions, ideas, revisions in place in the next meeting, then the staff then has time to run that through the actual policy team, and then we can get clarity on like, well, this is here because of why, and et cetera. So to figure out what is possible. We don't have any public joining us today, or at least not signed up for comment. Right, but he has not signed up for comment. Okay. Any other comments, either in the room? I'll start within the room. Any other comments in the room from our board or staff?
ODU is doing a big maritime, I think April something. And then also IPF, International Partnering Forum, coming in the end of April. We're working with Virginians for Offshore Wind to have a big town hall, hopefully at the Virginia Aquarium that week. Just, community Yeah, just a lot to get excited about as far as just these big events, because the International Partnering Forum is big, really, really big.
Yeah.
Virginia, in Virginia Beach, at Virginia Beach Convention Center. So hopefully we'll have a presence there. I know it's it's very expensive.
Yeah, and on that note, I'm surprised it didn't come up. I thought the question would come up. Our membership in Oceanic was denied. Director said no to the memberships because of the federal funding freeze, but he did say, yes, we can still continue with the sponsorship for the IPF along with VEDP. So we've got 21,000 committed. If VEDP can come up with the matching 21,000 and then whatever Virginia. That was good because I was sweating that they were.
Did we ever secure at least a discount? Or
Well, there's a discount.
Yeah.
I think it's 20% off.
Yeah.
Now that we're no longer members, we don't get the membership discount.
Well, I think I think Virginia Beach Economic Development can do a discount of, I think, 20%. I think VMA members get 10%, something like that.
I think we'll be all right on that front.
Yep.
But
well, for everybody on the call, because I know it's come up, if anybody from the board wants to go, there are no free tickets for anyone, but there are discounts. So if you are interested in going and you want to pay a discounted ticket, let me know and I can at least hand you off to the right people to help you with registration. But it's not a big discount. Like I said, 20% at most, and the ticket's like what, $1,500? Yeah, 1,700.
for non-members are.
Yeah.
So 20% off a lot of money is still.
Yeah. Yeah.
Burned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it's 70% of their operating budget is this conference. It's a lot. Online, I'll start with Howard. Howard, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I don't.
Okay. Joe, any questions or comments today?
No.
Okay. Well, I think that covers it for the day then.
I'm sorry, I thought you were going to cover it. So for the provide some and get them.
Yes, I think the plan would, or this would be my thought. Because I'm not sure I want to do a subcommittee yet or anything like that. I think everyone go back. This is the homework. Review the code, whatever else you think needs to be changed, start doing your markups. If you have your markups, you can go ahead and share them, send them to myself and the department staff, because then we can start compiling them, send them around, I think, even before the next meeting, because that would save a ton of time if everyone's ready to come to the meeting and basically not report out, but like hash out any differences and then say, yep, we like these things. And then the staff can run with it, right? At least to the next step.
Maybe by April.
Yeah, we can do
Would
that.
that be reasonable?
Q2. April.
First meeting would have been back in January, but that didn't happen. So
Yes.
January, April, July, and then October. So stick to it in April.
That's fine. Didn't we pick all the dates?
I think it's like the third Wednesday of
March.
second
End of March.
second Wednesday.
Yeah, end of the quarter.
How would you like to, tonight, then you can.
For which,
Enabling
The
legislation.
charter
VOWDA.
for the VOWDA charter.
That's
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah, all VOWDA code.
Or name on it, turn it to you with comments that you.
And merge it and
all
then
together so that all the change suggestions.
Ken, did you say that there are other authorities that are in energy involved.
Yeah,
That-
Clean Energy Advisory Board, I don't have a clue what the status of that is. They have not met in quite a while. The Nuclear Energy Consortium Authority.
Are there any that have like, what in your opinion are good models of the setup?
What's set up?
Like their mandates, their authority, you know, just,
Kind of all model off each other. The only one that's different is this one, because this is the only one governor picks all of the members. Solar and Storage Authority, the governor gets X number of picks, the House gets X, and the Senate gets more of them.
Okay, so I have a note here, all comments back to myself and the staff by the end of March, 3/31, because that gives time to compile everything, send it around, and get ready for an April meeting. So, Jonica, can we look at a date in April? Can we do another doodle poll? Thank you. Oh,
I think they're already on the calendar for the year.
okay.
My calendar.
That was the doodle poll you had.
Authority said I don't have them marked in my calendar, so maybe they can be sent around again.
I'll send out the poll again and then we can.
An April date.
Are there any specific weeks?
I'd have to look at the calendar, whatever our normal interval is. And then if that, we just can find out if that works or not. And if it doesn't work, we'll look at a different one.
third Wednesday is April 16th.
All right.
That works for me.
You-
2 weeks ahead of IPF.
It's spring break for those of us with littles, but I mean, that's not a problem. Unless I'm out of town.
The 16th,
Okay.
About the 23rd.
I can't do the 23rd.
Okay.
9th.
9th is possible. Does anybody have a problem with the 9th?
9th,
Out of town on the night.
You're out of town.
because we know who the weak link is.
Issue with the 16th was just,
Well, someone else said they couldn't do 16. Well, can everybody do 16? Can you do 16? No, you can't do. All right, so. Yeah, okay. All right, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. And maybe we look at the rest of Q2. So even if it's May or a non-Wednesday or a May. No, it doesn't have to be a Wednesday. Yeah, all of April, I think. Yeah, okay. All right, last call for comments. Yep. Yes, oh, it should definitely be in person. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I believe the bylaws have one meeting in Richmond. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Double check that.
Yep. Okay.
Fucking believe it.
Yeah, yeah. Yep. So the question we were asking is, should we have anybody else come and speak? And I think to prioritize, if we're going to do anything with the code, it needs to get started. That has to be the priority. I personally don't need an update from Dominion. I mean, unless you guys really need an info session. And then getting Department of Energy to come in, it would just depend on what we want them to talk about.
I've been here. especially if we're getting ready. That would impact anything that we would want to.
That he was going to attend our spring meeting, right?
Mhm.
Anyway.
Well, I wouldn't, I would make it so that he could at least join virtually unless we want to have the meeting in Richmond, because I don't want him to drive down here to give 10 minutes and then, oh, no. Yeah, but I know he's up there too, so. Okay, so I'm gonna add. Can you clear it that he'd be willing to come spend 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes at the next meeting? Is that something y'all can?
Larry? Let Larry be the go-to.
Have
A date.
on our calendars, I think.
Okay, okay.
Include him
Yeah.
in the doodle poll with a note in the doodle poll.
Yeah, because I don't know if he wants to sit around and like listen to us hash out line items. Okay, all right, meeting adjourned, 11:21.